So happy New Year, everybody. As we approach the end of this year, I always love to be able to focus in on the books that matter. And we've spent the year talking about books that serve as windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors that help create transformation, that spark wonder and curiosity, that create bonds of empathy and connection. And sometimes those books ruffle a few feathers, and sometimes they make us uncomfortable, and sometimes they get some people a little bit crazy. And that's where we run into some of the book banning challenges and the other barriers to our freedom to read. This week on the Adventures in Learning podcast, I am so thrilled to welcome a young friend of mine, Dynahlee Padilla-Vasquez. We met through a friend of ours, Dr. Lisa Phillips at SUNY New Paltz, and Dynahlee is one of the most brilliant young minds that I know. She's a consummate storyteller, and she's here to share with us a story of a book that has been challenged many times, that was the book that helped transform and change her life. Wonder, curiosity, connection. Where will your adventures take you? I'm Dr. Diane, and thank you for joining me on today's episode of Adventures in Learning. So welcome to the show, Dynahlee. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. You are too kind, and I'm so grateful we met this summer.
Me too. So one of the things you and I bonded about when we first met was the whole idea of books as transformative experience. And you had one of those experiences that was super powerful when you were growing up. And you just had it published in Everyday Advocacy. And so I'm wondering, do you want to read from the essay and then we'll talk more deeply about what that experience meant to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So the title of this op-ed/essay is called "Thanks to a Banned Book, I Forgave My Drug-Addicted Grandpa and Escaped His Path." So I'll start and read a bit from it. So when I was 7, we heard a knock at the chain door. We lived in the Bronx projects on the 21st floor with a view of the George Washington Bridge. My dad's father, Raul, had made his way past the basketball court where men argued about drug deals and up a rickety, dimly lit elevator to get to our apartment. I never met Raul before. I first noticed his elongated pinky nail, nicotine-stained teeth, and untamed black hair. I didn't want to, but my dad told me to give the stranger and his prison-issued release clothes a kiss on the cheek. 4 days later, on November 4th, 2004, Grandpa Raul's lifeless body was found in the grass near a bench in a park. A needle lay close by. He was only 41. His death ignited a burning question in me. How could my grandfather choose drugs over his family, his freedom, his own life? Asking Dad these questions in the months after was too painful for him. Yet the questions kept aflame. Years later, as I was sifting through books in colorful baskets at the back of Miss Little's 7th grade English classroom, I came across a black cover with the word crank written in white like chalk. Crank, also published in 2004, is Ellen Hopkins' first novel, which captures her daughter's addiction journey through fevers. I fell in love with the fact that the title of every page started a new poem, telling the entire narrative through verse. One poem included phrases tilting down the page. The shape of the words described what meth felt like. Another poem toyed with the idea of flirting with the monster. Through these stanzas, I pictured Grandpa Raul snorting coke and going through brutal withdrawals from heroin just to catch another fleeting high. Every day, I waited patiently for independent reading time. My heart ebbed and flowed as I read the lines that connected me to Grandpa. I borrowed the book after school and read it in my dark purple bedroom at night. Highlighter nearby, dictionary at my fingertips. I even combined allowances with bookstore gift cards to build my prized collection of Crank, Trilogy, and more of Hopkins books. And I'll stop there.
So when we talk about books as transformative experiences, this particular book really did impact your 7th grade self. Can you describe a little bit more about what drew you to this book and how it stayed with you all these years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember independent reading time like very fondly. Like it was one of those times where like that 1 hour of freedom to read was like really exciting for me. And most of the other students were like, no, I don't want to read. I want to like journal. I want to do anything else but have to sit and read. And I loved it because I would just go to the back of the classroom, look through the colorful baskets and find what appealed to me and have the opportunity to keep reading that every time that 1 hour came up throughout the week and the weeks to come. So at one point, I found Crank. And as I mentioned in the essay, it was a black cover with with a white title on it. It said Crank. And I said, what's Crank? This kind of sounds like crack. Like, I wonder if this is about drugs. And I was curious. And I was curious because when I was 7, my grandfather died of an addiction. And I was like, well, maybe this could help me. Maybe I could understand better. Because growing up, I was always told, and we all are, like, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. But there was a part of me then that was like, well, why is it so bad? And why did grandpa have to die from that? And there has to be more to this story. Anyways, I found this book. I realized it's by Ellen Hopkins, and I had no idea who she was, but I was like, I love this already. Because when I opened the first page, it was in poetry. So it was maybe 5 words to one page, 20 words to another page. Some of the poems were shaped in Christmas trees or a star or something that kind of shaped what maybe it felt like to be in a high and not understand what was going on with your body or eyesight. But the visuals on the page with the way it was written and the short poem stanza kind of writing is what appealed to me as a writer, a poet at the time with poetry classes and stuff like that in school. And so that's what got me to pick up that book, knowing like something like this probably happened to my grandpa. Also, the structure of it. It was in poems. It made the read like super fun and short and in a sense addicting. Like I was able to get through it quickly and then say, ooh, I want to read more of this. And that's how I got hooked to her trilogy and all her books, to be frank.
And in many ways, you've just illuminated a book that you picked up because you saw yourself in it initially. So, in that sense, it was serving as a mirror, but really it was serving as a window into the world that your grandfather was in, a world that you didn't understand. And then what I love about this example is it also served as a transformative experience as a sliding glass door, because as you go on to talk about in the essay, this book and its experience stayed with you throughout so much of your high school years and into your college and beyond choices. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the transformative part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because I found this book and I was so invested in the word and the form and poetry in general, when I talked to my mentor, 17, 18 years old, like, hey, like, I want to go to college. I'm the first one in my family to go. So I'm first generation. Like, I want to study English or poetry. And she was like, that is amazing. But you are also super curious and you ask really good questions and you have stories to tell. And I can see you helping tell other people's stories. Have you thought about journalism where you can still include that creative writing and poetry and those aspects of writing that you love into the potential reporting and feature style writing that you can do? And I was like, didn't think of it. That's what I'm doing. So that because of that book, Crank, just teaching me more about language and just diverse stories and the human aspect of maybe something really bad like drug addiction and alcoholism. I thought, well, if I study journalism, maybe there's a path that I can take where I'm telling some really hard stories or some heartfelt stories that are going to hopefully one day help shape policy, depending on what I'm writing about. And so that's in terms of like the book exposing me to like my next steps. That's what it helped me do is like not do drugs and also become a writer, which essentially is like how Crank shaped me.
And it sounds like it also helped to hone what was already existing in you, which I think is a finely tuned empathy to the world around you, not having to agree with other people's choices, but being able to understand their perspective and what might be driving their motivations. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that an accurate assessment?
No, super accurate. And I love it. It's not something I've heard before in that way. So I really do appreciate that. Yeah, I think part of my curiosity and journalism background and just a storyteller in me, I always want to try to understand what's happening. And because of this book, that was the journey I was on, like trying to understand addiction, knowing that I'm not ever going to touch drugs because what if I too become addicted? That was, if it's in your family, you never know. And I just thought, well, I want to understand this so that I can humanize this. Like, grandpa's not the villain. He was just addicted. But when I was 7, I thought he was the villain. I thought he left us because of drugs, but it was really, he left us because of drugs in a different way. Like, it's a sickness, it's a disease, and I didn't understand that at the time until I began reading Crank and more books, and just as a college student doing research on this for research papers, like doing kind of like I did something for picture culture in college, which is basically this class on how photos tell lies and how some photos, of course, don't tell the whole story and what that can do in a crisis. And so I talked about the addiction crisis, particularly in Puerto Rico, and how mass media didn't necessarily cover it in a way that humanized addicts there. And in the end, I said, well, addicts are still humans and we need to empathize with that because they need help and we need reforms in order to get them out of addiction and into society where they can recover and be their full, normal, healthy selves. So, yeah, the book helped in so many ways now that I think about it, like beyond just like becoming a writer, but the interest in the research and the writing and the stories behind them.
And you are a storyteller. You do this for a living. You ask people questions. As you're looking for a story, as you're thinking about what you want to tell, what are some of the elements that make a good and compelling story, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about like my piece with everyday advocacy regarding Crank. And I thought what's going to make this like a good story is there like a personal appeal? Like, is it something that I can speak to from experience? And if so, can I add that the color to it, whether it's quotes, data, memories from the past? And this piece allowed me to go into my past and ask my dad questions that I couldn't answer because I was too young. And he helped me a lot with some of the details, like whether when did we see my grandpa last? And we both remembered like it was Halloween when I was 7. Okay, what was he wearing? What were you doing? How did you feel in that moment? And knowing like literally a couple of days later, he passed away. Like my dad, unfortunately, like was the one who had to look at the body because his grandmother couldn't do it. She was like, I need help and I don't want to be the one to do this. And so my dad went through a lot and he was only 24 years old. He had me very young. So my grandpa was very young, my dad is very young. And that's why I was so young exposed to this, like, oh, he passed away from drug addiction. And so in any case, the story needs that like memory and history, and that's what this piece did for me, is like go down memory lane and bring about the empathy that I think people feel from it when they read it, and to know that like there are solutions. That sometimes solutions are in books and we don't even know it until we pick one up.
And I know that it can be difficult for people to recognize that there's a fear factor, particularly for adults, less so for kids, but adults seem to feel that kids are not capable of handling these deeper questions within a book. To the point that I put up a bunch of books behind me that have all been challenged at one point or another. Things like Wish Tree by Catherine Applegate, Frankie and Bug by Gail Forman, Black Girl Dreaming by Jackie Woodson, The Giver by Lois Lowry. I mean, the list unfortunately goes on and on. And I find myself wondering, why is it that adults are so afraid of children being able to experience other perspectives in a book. And I don't necessarily have an answer to that, but I'm sort of curious about your take on that as somebody who spent your childhood reading freely.
Yeah, I think I say I used to, I'll start by saying this. Like when I was younger, I did not like how young my parents were because I got so many questions about, like, are you sure those are your parents? Like, are you, that's not your brother, that's not your sister. And, I have to explain, well, they had me young. Like, what do you want me to do? Right. But I think that youthfulness and that knowing that, like, they didn't get a chance to do certain things in high school or even go to college because they had me, they wanted to give me a little bit more freedom. Freedom to read, to write, to say what kind of music I liked because they had to grow up quickly to raise me. So in growing up, they didn't censor me. They were like, well, if you want to do something, let's communicate about it. If you want to read something and or watch something and maybe I think it's like, it's not age appropriate for you, let's talk about it. And they still are like so good at being able to communicate and teach us how to communicate, like my siblings and I, that growing up I didn't fear that I was reading something wrong or that I was doing something wrong. And I think they didn't either because we got to communicate. My dad would do these book bag checks as a joke and say, hey, randomly, I'm going to check your book bags, make sure there's nothing in here that shouldn't be in here kind of thing. And that was like our way to just like laugh and talk and see what I was reading, for example. And yeah, they let me. So I think communication is key when it comes to like not being fearful. Like be curious about what your children are into or up to, and who knows what conversations are going to come from that.
And Lori Hall Sanderson said earlier this year when I had her on the show that it's okay to censor what your own children are reading. You can have that conversation with your own kids and make those decisions for your own family. But you don't have the right to do that for other people's families. And I think that's where we hit sticking points in this country is, just because a book's not right for you or right for your family doesn't mean it's not right for somebody else. And there are kids out there who need to see themselves in Frankie and Bug, for example, or need to see themselves in Crank, or in Other Words for Home. And there are kids out there who have never had those experiences, who desperately need to see those worlds to be able to build up some empathy to understand kids for whom those worlds are the reality. And so I think that, as you said, it comes down to communication and being able to talk to your kids and talk about what you're reading and read it with them. If you feel like something is too adult or not age appropriate, read it together and answer the questions. It's like the best opportunity for conversation. Imagine a space where curiosity drives innovation, where empathy fuels collaboration, and where learning feels less like a task and more like an adventure. My message isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about changing how you see the plate entirely. I'm Dr. Diane Jackson Schnorr, and through the power of purposeful play, I equip leaders, educators, and organizations with the tools you need to unlock creative problem solving, deepen human connection, and build resistant ecosystems of empathy and innovation. Attendees will walk away not just inspired, but empowered, with immediately usable strategies to spark curiosity in teams, to lead with empathy, and to infuse learning into their everyday cultures. You'll learn how play isn't child's work. It's the secret weapon of the world's most effective leaders and change makers. This is not a feel-good talk that fades by Monday morning. It's a movement, a shift in how we engage people, solve problems, and lead meaningful change. My talks and workshops are shaped by decades of experience in education and a transformative message that connects across sectors. Whether your audience is corporate, educational, or nonprofit, they'll leave ready to rethink what's possible, both personally and professionally. Because when we learn and lead through play, we don't just change organizations, we change the world. Check it out at drdianeadventures.com. So as you were doing your piece, Really, it started because you had a chance to talk to the author on the 20th anniversary of Crank. Can you talk a little bit about the research? Because I know you did a really interesting dive into book banning in this country and sort of book challenges. And I wondered if you could share a little bit more of that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I wrote for Everyday Advocacy was actually like my college essay, like years ago. And it was a story that just kept coming up because every time I got a new Ellen Hopkins book, I remembered, well, yeah, I wrote my college essay about how this book has transformed my life. And so at one point, narratively, was doing a memoir contest, and I said, you know what, let me put my name in the hat and see what happens. And although I didn't get it, it turned out to be an opportunity to just revise this memoir again and turn it into an op-ed, turn it into an argument given all the book challenges and the news that was happening around this. And so because of that, I reached out to Ellen Hopkins over Facebook and I said, hey, I have an op-ed ready to go on why Crank and other books need to stay on library bookshelves and especially in public schools, the way I had access to it in a public school in the Bronx. And she said, well, I have editors that are actually doing a call for pitches on this kind of story. And ultimately, even though that didn't work out, what it did was allow me to do some outreach and connect with her and say, hey, I'm working on this. I know you've been working on this for your whole career. And, even though the story hasn't been placed yet, can we stay in touch? Are you open to doing an interview together? Because at that time, it was the 20th anniversary of Crank. It's the 20th anniversary of my grandfather's death, which was just last year. And then it was also like that August, she had come out with a new book. And it had been like a couple of years since she's come out with a latest book, given the censorship issues she's been going through in publication. So in any case, I said, well, this is a great opportunity. We could talk about Crank, which was your first novel, and we could talk about your latest novel. And so that experience was incredible because 1 year later, then I was able to use that interview with Ellen Hopkins to link to this revised op-ed that Everyday Advocacy took in. And so the data is really compelling and crazy. I mean, today, we're in November now, but just like last month when the new Pen America report came out, Stephen King is now the number one banned author in America. And he is a novelist who does murder stories. And Ellen Hopkins was the most banned author ranking number one last year. And Crank is still ranked at number 6 then and today. And so I say this because the list is growing. The authors that are getting that title of most banned author is also growing. And authors are sad about it. It's not like, oh, we're banned, so we're getting more sales. It's like,
Oh,
no,
absolutely not.
we're
It actually freezes and
yep,
it's a chilling effect, particularly libraries that get scared about, do I put this on my shelves?
yeah,
Getting the space in bookshelves, absolutely. And it's filtering down to elementary schools as well. Picture books. Big Mooncake for Little Star, of all things, wound up on one of those lists. And there is, there's nothing objectionable about that book. It's a celebration of folk culture, the moon, science, and Asian experience.
yeah,
And it's one of those things where I think, and I think your data shows this as well, that often the people who are making these challenges, they're these organized groups who have never read the books and have no idea what they're challenging, but it must be bad.
right. It gets taken aspects of the book or chapter or even a paragraph or a sentence gets taken out of context. You have to read the whole book before you decide if it's appropriate or not for a particular age group. And if it is, that is a conversation that parents and school boards and folks that are in the space can have. That's not the job of a parent who doesn't go to that school or want their kid reading. As you mentioned before, the policy is like, well, if you don't want your child reading it, that is okay, but you can't dictate what other children who are not yours can read. It's the same with movies or CDs.
Well, and that makes sense. And, I think maybe if more of us were able to tap into that and understand that nobody's trying to tell you how to raise your child, but you have to give space to offer that same grace to other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and getting back to that notion of empathy, unless you've spent time trying to get to know somebody's perspective, you don't really know what book it is that they need or that child that you see walking past you every day needs. You don't know what is going on inside of them and what book friend might be a really useful guide or somebody who opens up a portal into other spaces for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say this, that folks, parents, adults, young children, small children, like they need access to books in case it's the book that's going to save their life or help them through a hard time or even just give them something to do in a safe space. Like, I rather my kid be reading and I can see them than sneaking off doing who knows what, right? Books can be friends. And I think it's an opportunity to just read and be a part of a new world and enjoy the time to read. Like, we're now in a time where books are being taken away. And so if we can enjoy the time and the space to read in safe places, then keep doing it.
Well, and ironically, I had read this recently that, we spend so much time as parents monitoring what our, we're fixated on what our children are reading, the visible things we can see. And yet we've given them free access to this online Wild West kingdom of the internet with very few guardrails or breaks. And maybe we're putting our attention in the wrong places.
Yeah. There's so many coalitions about, online, how we can help our children with better online practices, because there are definitely dangers there that, that's what some coalitions are working on, right? And so, yeah, I rather us put our energy in having the kids read any books they want, because it is wild west out there online. I even limit myself. Like, sometimes I just turn off Instagram notifications, delete certain apps, because I want to focus my time on reading good things and not brain rotting.
I've done very similar things where I'm limiting my social media time these days because, as you said, I want to be able to spend time reading and writing and engaging like this. Like, I think the real world connections are so important for us in terms of flexing our empathy muscles, in terms of helping us be happier, healthier human beings. And so, as I look into the new year, since we're approaching that new year very quickly, I want to kind of end with a question of hope. And I am wondering what currently brings you hope as we look at the new year.
Ooh, that's such a good question. So, what currently brings me hope, I, even though it's hard, I think the opportunities that we might not see yet. And so, right now, I'm in the midst of looking for work, and here and there, I find organizations with really, really amazing missions, and I'm like, oh, it would be great to work there. Like, there are opportunities out there for folks who are looking to pivot or start something new. And I think, that gives me hope that there are good things out there. There are good missions out there and teams that are just waiting for the right fit and vice versa. So that's what gives me hope these days.
Wonderful. Well, I wish you a very joyous new year. And I thank you so much for coming on the show today, Dynahlee. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Diane. This was great.
You've been listening to the Adventures in Learning podcast with your host, Dr. Diane. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, download, and let us know what you think. And please tell a friend. If you want the full show notes and the pictures, please go to drdianeadventures.com. We look forward to you joining us on our next adventure.